Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans. The cost of education beyond high school has gone up significantly. The total cost to attend a public four-year university has nearly tripled in 40 years. Tripled. Instead of properly funding public colleges, many states have cut back their support. We were just talking about that, the old. Many states have cut back support for their state universities, leaving students to pick up more of the tab. For 50 years, Pell Grants have been a key way for the federal government to help lower-income families, particularly those earning less than $60,000 a year, to send their kids to college. Those Pell Grants used to cover 80% of the cost of going to a public four-year college. Today, Pell Grants cover roughly 32%. That's 1/3 of the cost as opposed to before. Education is a ticket to a better life. It's something Jill and I, Kamala and Doug, we understand deeply. I'm sure the vast majority of you do as well. But over time, that ticket has become too expensive for too many Americans. All this means is the entire generation is now saddled with unsustainable debt in exchange for an attempt, at least, at a college degree. The burden is so heavy that even if you graduate, you may not have access to the middle-class life that the college degree once provided. Many people can't qualify for a mortgage to buy a home because of the debt they continue to carry. They carry it's too high. They can't come up with the down payment anyway. A lot of folks are even putting off starting families because of the cost. And the dream of starting their own business is just way off in the distance with the debt that somebody you're saddled with. Many of you had to leave school because of financial strain was much too high. About 1/3 of the borrowers have debt but no degree. The worst of both worlds, debt and no degree. The burden is especially heavy on Black and Hispanic borrowers, who on average have less family wealth to pay for it. They don't own their homes to borrow against to be able to pay for college. And the pandemic only made things worse. My campaign for president, I made a commitment. That would provide student debt relief. And I'm honoring that commitment today. Using the authority Congress granted the Department of Education, we will forgive $10,000 in outstanding federal student loans. In addition, students who come from low-income families, which allowed them to qualify to receive a Pell Grant, will have their debt reduced $20,000. Both of these targeted actions are for families who need it the most. Working and middle-class people hit especially hard during the pandemic, making under $125,000 a year. If you make more than that, you don't qualify. If you make under $125,000, you get $10,000 knocked off your student debt. If you make under $125,000 a year and you received a Pell Grant, you'll get an additional $10,000 knocked off that total, for a total of $20,000 relief. 95% of the borrowers can benefit from these actions. That's 43 million people. Of the 43 million, over 60% are Pell Grant recipients. That's 27 million people who will get $20,000 in debt relief. Nearly 45% can have their student debt fully canceled. That's 20 million people who can start getting on with their lives. All this means people can finally crawl out from under that mountain of debt, to get on top of their rent and their utilities, to finally think about buying a home or starting a family or starting a business. And by the way, when this happens, the whole economy is better off. In the coming weeks, the Department of Education will lay out in detail a short and simple form to apply for this relief, along with information when this application process opens. By resuming student loan payments at the same time as we provide targeted relief, we're taking an economically responsible course. As a consequence, About $50 billion a year will start coming back into the Treasury because of resumption of debt. Independent experts agree that these actions taken together will provide real benefits for families without meaningful effect on inflation. How do we pay for it? We pay for it by what we've done. Last year, we cut the deficit by more than $350 billion. This year, we're on track to cut it by more than $1.7 trillion by the end of this fiscal year, the single largest deficit reduction in a single year in the history of America. And the Inflation Reduction Act is going to cut it by another $300 billion over the next decade because Medicare will be paying less for prescription drugs, and over $1 trillion we added out for the next 2 decades. The point is this: there is plenty of deficit reduction to pay for the programs, cumulative deficit reduction to pay for the programs many times over. We're proposing to make what's called an income-driven repayment plan simple and fair. And here's how. No one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future, whether for community college or a four-year college, will have to pay more than 5% of their discretionary income to repay their loan. That's income after you pay the necessities like housing, food, and the like. You currently pay 10%. We're cutting that in half to 5%. And after you pay your loan for 20 years, your obligation will be fulfilled if it hadn't already been fulfilled, meaning you won't have to pay any more, period. And borrowers whose original balance was less than $12,000, many of whom are community college students, will be done paying just after 10 years. These changes will save more than $1,000 a year on average for the borrower. We're also fixing what's called, and this has been the bane of driving me crazy when I was out of office, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Now, this program forgives student loans to encourage those students who have those loans if they go into public service. Think of the millions who are public school teachers, local police officers, workers at local charities, members of the military and the National Guard, and so many more. Think of the folks who work for federal, state, local, tribal governments, keeping essential services going, responding to natural disaster, all those firefighters and cops. The program is designed so that if you serve in one of these jobs, and we'll be able to list those and that, you'll be able to accurately assess whether you do, and make your loan payments for 10 years, even if it's not consecutive years, your remaining balance will be completely forgiven. It's a great idea, but the program's a mess. And one more big change we're making to the system is we're holding colleges accountable for jacking up costs without delivering value to students. We've all heard of those schools luring students with a promise of big paychecks when they graduate, only to watch these students be ripped off and left with mountains of debt. And my predecessor looked the other way, for some reason, with good reason, to do anything about this fraud. My administration is taking it on. For example, the Department of Education works with private education associations to accredit colleges and universities so they can receive federal aid. Well, last week, the Department of Education fired a college accreditor that allowed colleges like ITT and Corinthian to defraud borrowers. And combined with our emergency actions, the Public Service Forgiveness Program and other actions we've taken, we've been able to cancel more than $32 billion in student debt for 1.6 million borrowers, including those defrauded by these bad acting schools. Our goal is to shine a light on the worst actors so students can avoid these debt traps.